Did you know that many famous actors and actresses from the golden age of Hollywood had secret injuries or physical challenges? That's right. These stars worked in a time when Hollywood wanted everyone to look perfect, so they came up with clever tricks to hide their differences. Let's dive into these amazing stories. Harold Lloyd, the one-handed stuntman. Have you ever seen those old black and white comedy movies where a man is hanging from the hands of a giant clock? That was Harold Lloyd. But here's something you probably didn't know. Lloyd was doing all those crazy stunts with a seriously injured hand. In 1919, Harold Lloyd was taking some pictures to advertise his movies. He picked up what he thought was a fake bomb, a prop that wouldn't really explode. But it wasn't fake at all. The bomb suddenly went boom right in his hand. The explosion was so powerful that it blew off his thumb and pointer finger on his right hand. Now, most people would probably quit doing dangerous stunts after losing parts of their hand. But not Harold Lloyd. He wasn't going to let this accident stop him from making people laugh. Instead, he got super creative. Lloyd had a special glove made that was the same color as his skin. The glove had fake fingertips made of wax that looked just like real fingers. When he wore this special glove, people watching his movies had no idea parts of his hand were missing. Lloyd became really clever about hiding his injured hand. Sometimes he would keep moving it around quickly so the audience couldn't get a good look at it. Other times, he'd casually slip it into his pocket between scenes. Even in close-up shots, most people never noticed anything was wrong with his hand. Can you imagine doing all those dangerous stunts with basically 1.5 hands? That famous scene where he's hanging from the clock in safety last, he did that with an injured hand. His friends later said that all those amazing stunts were even more incredible because Lloyd was doing them without all his fingers, and the whole time, the audience had no clue about the pain he felt or how he had to adapt to keep performing. That's pretty amazing, right? Herbert Marshall. The star with a wooden leg next up is Herbert Marshall, a super classy actor who appeared in movies like Trouble in Paradise and The Little Foxes. Marshall had an incredible secret that almost nobody knew about. He was missing his entire right leg. During World War I, Herbert Marshall was shot by a German sniper. The bullet hit him in the leg, and his injury was so bad that doctors had to amputate his whole right leg. He spent a whole year in hospitals recovering, but Marshall didn't want to give up on his dream of becoming an actor. Back then, having only one leg would normally stop someone from becoming a movie star. But Marshall was determined. He taught himself to walk using a wooden prosthetic leg, and he practiced until he could walk so smoothly that most people couldn't even tell he was using an artificial limb. How did he hide it so well? First, he always wore perfectly tailored pants that were long enough to cover his prosthetic leg. On movie sets, he worked with directors to plan exactly how he would move around so that his walking looked natural. Every step and movement was carefully thought out beforehand. His friends said that wearing the wooden leg was really painful, especially during long days of filming. The straps and harness that held it in place would dig into his skin and make him sore. To make himself more comfortable without anyone noticing, Marshall cut special holes in his pockets. These hidden holes let him reach through and loosen the uncomfortable straps when they got too tight. The movie studios never told anyone about Marshall's missing leg. They wanted everyone to think he was physically perfect. Marshall also had a beautiful, smooth voice that became his trademark. This helped draw attention away from his subtle limp. Herbert Marshall acted in over 100 movies and TV shows during a career that lasted more than 40 years. And the whole time, most of his fans had absolutely no idea about the physical challenges he overcame every single day to create his seamless performances. Pretty incredible, right? Merl Oberon, the star with the special light. Merl Oberon was one of the most beautiful actresses in old Hollywood. She starred in the classic movie Wuthering Heights with Laurence Olivier, but in 1937, something terrible happened. Merl was in a serious car accident that left deep scars across one side of her gorgeous face. Back in those days, if an actress got scars on her face, her career was usually over. Movie cameras were not very forgiving, and they would show every tiny flaw. Studios would often fire actresses who didn't look perfect anymore. Many people thought Merl's rising career was finished, but something wonderful happened instead. A cinematographer named Lucien Ballard, who later became Merl's husband, invented a special light just for her. It was called the Obi light, named after Merl Oberon. This clever light attached directly to the camera and created a soft, glowing effect that made skin look smoother and made her eyes sparkle. The light helped hide Merl's scars when they were filming. That wasn't the only trick they used. Makeup artists created special formulas just for Merl that helped cover her scars. They would arrive hours before filming started to carefully apply this makeup. Directors also helped by filming Merl mainly from her undamaged side and using camera angles that flattered her appearance. Merl worked really hard to keep her scars a secret. She was so good at concealing them that even journalists who interviewed her in person rarely noticed anything unusual about her skin. All these efforts meant she could continue playing romantic leading roles in movies. The really cool thing is that the special Obi light that was invented to help Merl ended up helping lots of other actors too. It became a popular tool in Hollywood for making everyone look better on camera. So Merl's determination to keep working despite her scars actually led to innovations that improved filmmaking for everyone. Dina Shore, the singer who overcame polio. Dina Shore was a really popular singer and TV host who had her own variety show that lots of people loved to watch. But what viewers didn't know was that Dina had battled polio as a child. Polio is a disease that can cause paralysis, and in Dina's case, it left one of her legs slightly weaker and shorter than the other one. This gave her a noticeable limp when she walked normally, but if you watched her TV show, you'd never know she had any trouble walking. Dina came up with some super smart ways to hide her condition. First, she wore specially designed shoes with a built-up sole on her affected foot. This made both her legs the same length when she stood. She also chose to wear beautiful flowing gowns that went all the way to the floor. These long dresses completely hid her legs from view. When she needed to move around on her show, Dina worked with choreographers who created movements that showed off her upper body instead of her legs. If Dina needed to dance with a partner, that person would get special instructions about how to subtly guide and support her during their movements together. This way, viewers never noticed anything unusual about the way she moved. When she wasn't on camera, Dina worked really hard to stay strong. She did special exercises to strengthen her affected leg and help manage the pain she sometimes felt. The TV network bosses were very concerned about keeping her condition a secret because they wanted viewers to see Dina as the perfect all-American entertainer. Dina's sunny personality and amazing singing voice helped draw attention away from how she moved. Plus, the TV show sets were carefully designed so she could move around the studio with apparent ease. Dina Shore's story shows just how far stars would go to maintain Hollywood's illusion of physical perfection. Buster Keaton. 9½ Fingers. Buster Keaton was one of the greatest comedians from the silent movie era. He's famous for doing incredibly dangerous stunts with a completely serious face, never smiling. But did you know that Buster performed all those precise physical stunts despite missing part of his right index finger? When Buster was just 2 years old, he had a terrible accident. His hand got caught in an old-fashioned washing machine wringer. That's a device with rollers that squeezed water out of clothes. The accident crushed part of his finger, leaving him with 9½ fingers instead of 10. But throughout his entire film career, Buster kept this injury a carefully guarded secret. Buster became really good at hiding his damaged finger. Sometimes he used clever props to keep that hand busy. Other times, he would position his hand strategically so the missing fingertip wasn't visible. If there was going to be a close-up shot of his hands, he occasionally wore flesh-colored gloves to make all his fingers look complete. His trademark deadpan expression, that famous serious face that never smiled, actually helped him too. It made people focus on his face rather than his hands. Plus, Buster moved incredibly fast in his films, making it almost impossible for audiences to notice anything unusual about his fingers. When Buster had publicity photos taken, he made sure photographers positioned his hands carefully or retouched the photos if necessary. He was such a perfectionist that he would film multiple takes of scenes that focused on his hands, making sure his damaged finger was hidden from the camera's view. If you freeze frame some of Buster's movies or look really closely at candid photographs, you might be able to spot that he has 9 complete fingers and 1 partial digit. But his physical coordination was so amazing that this minor limitation never affected his ability to perform the incredible complex stunts that still amaze people 100 years later. Peter Faulk, the one-eyed detective. Do you know Lieutenant Columbo? He was that famous TV detective who always wore a rumpled raincoat and asked just one more question. The actor who played him, Peter Faulk, had a secret that many viewers never knew. He only had one real eye. When Peter was just 3 years old, he developed a rare form of cancer in his right eye. To save his life, doctors had to surgically remove the eye completely. After the surgery, Peter was fitted with a glass prosthetic eye that matched his natural left eye almost perfectly in color and appearance. As he grew up, Peter developed a characteristic squint and head tilt that helped disguise the fact that one of his eyes wasn't real. These unique mannerisms became part of his charm as an actor. In fact, most viewers and even many of his colleagues never realized he had only one functioning eye. The really clever thing is that Peter actually incorporated his disability into his acting technique. Since he had limited peripheral vision, he had to turn his head more to see things to his right. This head-turning motion became part of Lieutenant Columbo's distinctive investigative style. That curious way he would look at suspects became central to the character's rumpled charm. Peter kept a collection of matched prosthetic eyes and sometimes used slightly different ones for different roles. He had a great sense of humor about his glass eye. There's a famous story where he supposedly took out his eye during a baseball game and handed it to an umpire after a bad call, saying, "Here, try using this." Even though Peter was rejected for military service because of his disability, he turned what could have been a disadvantage into something that made him unique as an actor. His slightly asymmetrical gaze became part of his special screen presence rather than a handicap. Peter Faulk won multiple Emmy and Golden Globe Awards during his career, proving that his one-eyed vision never limited his talent. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood's secret smile. Clark Gable was nicknamed the King of Hollywood and starred in the classic film Gone with the Wind. But did you know that from his early 30s until the end of his life, the king had no natural teeth at all? That's right, Clark Gable wore full dentures for most of his famous career. When he was in his early 30s, Gable developed a severe gum disease called periodontitis. This wasn't just about having bad teeth. The infection was so serious that it could have spread to other parts of his body and become life-threatening. By 1933, doctors had to pull almost all of his teeth, and Gable had to wear complete dentures for the remaining 27 years of his acting career. MGM Studios, where Gable worked, created a big cover-up about this. They told people he was just getting some minor dental work done while he recovered from having all his teeth removed and got used to wearing dentures. The studios didn't want any. To know that their handsome leading man had false teeth. Wearing dentures wasn't easy at first. Gable had trouble pronouncing certain words, and unfortunately, he sometimes had bad breath that his co-stars noticed but were too polite to mention. To help him look better on screen, cinematographers used special lighting techniques that minimize shadows around his mouth. Makeup artists carefully painted shadows to make his lips look more natural around the dentures. Gable worked really hard to overcome the challenges of wearing dentures. He practiced with speech therapists to correct his pronunciation issues. People who worked with him said he always carried mouthwash on movie sets, gallons of it, to make sure his breath stayed fresh. Despite all these challenges, Clark Gable's trademark smile continued to charm audiences in dozens of classic movies. The seductive grin that made hearts melt in Gone with the Wind came from carefully crafted false teeth, and almost nobody watching ever suspected a thing. Montgomery Clift, the rebuilt star. Montgomery Clift was one of Hollywood's most handsome and talented actors in the 1950s. His good looks and intense acting style made him a huge star. But in May 1956, something terrible happened that changed his life and career forever. One night, after leaving his friend Elizabeth Taylor's house, Monty, as friends called him, fell asleep while driving and crashed his car into a telephone pole. The accident was devastating. It shattered his once perfect face, breaking his jaw in multiple places and severely fracturing his nose and cheekbones. Surgeons worked for hours to reconstruct his face, but it was impossible to make him look exactly the same as before. When Monty returned to filmmaking after the accident, he needed lots of special help to continue his career. Directors like John Huston filmed him mainly from his less damaged left side. They use soft focus lenses, which make everything look a little blurry and dreamlike, and special lighting with lots of shadows to hide the differences in his face. Makeup artists spent hours every day working with Monty before filming. They used shading techniques to create contours that made his face look more symmetrical. Cinematographers used special filters on the cameras to soften his features on film. The accident left Monty with chronic pain that never fully went away. He started using painkillers and alcohol to cope with the pain, which created additional problems and made filming schedules more complicated. Despite these enormous challenges, Montgomery Clift delivered some of his most powerful performances after his accident. In films like Judgment at Nuremberg, directors worked with him to emphasize his still expressive, soulful eyes, rather than focusing on his altered facial structure. Monty's struggle shows both how obsessed Hollywood was with physical perfection and the extraordinary measures that were taken to maintain illusions when that perfection was shattered. His talent continued to shine through despite his injuries, proving that his gift as an actor went far deeper than his appearance. Claude Reigns. The partially blind commander. Claude Reigns had one of the most recognizable voices in old Hollywood. He played the police captain in Casablanca, who was shocked to find that gambling is going on in here. He was also the title character in The Invisible Man. But throughout his amazing career, Claude carried a secret wartime injury that the public never knew about. During World War I, Claude was caught in a German gas attack that permanently damaged his right eye. The attack destroyed about 90% of the vision in that eye, leaving him partially blind. But Claude didn't let this disability stop him from becoming one of Hollywood's most respected actors. Instead of giving up, Claude worked closely with directors and camera operators who developed special techniques to help hide his condition. They would position him carefully to favor his good left eye during scenes. They kept the key lights high above him so shadows wouldn't emphasize his damaged eye, and they created camera setups where his right eye would naturally fall into soft shadow. Claude's amazing voice, that distinctive cultured way of speaking, also helped draw attention away from any visual imperfections. Audiences were so captivated by his voice that they rarely focused on his eyes. Over time, Claude became incredibly good at compensating for his limited vision. He could hit his exact marks on set without hesitation, despite not being able to see clearly on his right side. The injury that might have ended another actor's career became an invisible part of his performances. What's really amazing is that audiences had absolutely no idea about Claude's vision limitation. They saw only his commanding presence and never guessed at the physical challenge behind his penetrating gaze. His talent and determination allowed him to overcome a disability that remained his secret throughout his celebrated career. Carole Lombard, the comedy queen's hidden scars. Carole Lombard was the queen of screwball comedy, those fast-talking, silly romantic comedies from the 1930s. Movies like My Man Godfrey and Nothing Sacred made her one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but Carole's career almost ended before it really began because of a terrible accident. Just before her 19th birthday, Carole was in a car accident where she was thrown through the windshield. This was in the days before safety glass, so the broken glass left a jagged network of scars across her left cheek and forehead. In Hollywood's golden age, physical beauty was considered essential for actresses. Having visible facial scars would normally mean the immediate end of an actress's career, especially someone as young as Carole. But Paramount Studios wasn't ready to give up on this talented young actress. Their makeup department came up with special techniques using putty-based foundations and careful contouring to hide the scarring. They essentially invented new makeup methods just to help Carole continue her career. The cinematographers helped too. They lit Carole predominantly from her unmarked right side, keeping her scarred left side in flattering shadow. They also used soft focus lenses that slightly blurred the image, helping to hide any remaining imperfections. Directors were in on the secret too. They positioned Carol in scenes to minimize exposure of her left profile in close-ups. They used careful blocking, that's how actors move around in a scene, to keep her good side toward the camera whenever possible. All these collaborative efforts completely concealed Lombard's facial scarring. Her vivacious personality and amazing comedic talent quickly became what people noticed about her, not any physical imperfections. In fact, her sparkling performances were so captivating that audiences never detected the scars that were carefully hidden beneath layers of specialized makeup. Carole Lombard went on to become one of the highest-paid stars in Hollywood, and her secret remained largely unknown until after her untimely death in a plane crash in 1942. Sammy Davis Jr., the one-eyed entertainer. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most talented entertainers ever. He could sing, dance, act, play instruments. He could do it all. He was part of the famous Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. But in November 1954, Sammy's incredible career almost came to a sudden end. While driving on Route 66, Sammy was in a terrible car accident that destroyed his left eye. The injury was so severe that doctors couldn't save the eye. For several months after the accident, Sammy wore an eye patch while he recovered. Then, he was fitted with a glass prosthetic eye that matched his natural right eye amazingly well. The glass eye was so perfectly matched to his real eye that even in close-up shots on TV or in movies, viewers couldn't tell the difference. Special lighting techniques helped minimize any shadows that might reveal the artificial eye. Sammy's characteristic squint, which had been part of his expression even before the accident, now served a practical purpose by helping conceal his prosthetic eye. Sammy was incredibly clever about incorporating his disability into his performances. He used rapid head movements and dazzling footwork in his dance routines that prevented audiences from focusing too long on his eyes. He was always in motion, which made it impossible to notice any subtle differences in his eyes. What's really interesting is that Sammy never publicly talked about his disability during the peak years of his career. He let his extraordinary talents take center stage instead. He could sing beautifully, dance amazingly, act convincingly, play multiple instruments, and do spot-on impressions of other celebrities. All these abilities captured people's attention, not his eyes. Sammy became so natural at compensating for his monocular vision, that means seeing with just one eye, that many people in the entertainment industry, including some casting directors, had no idea for years that the dynamic performer was working with only one eye. That shows just how talented and determined Sammy Davis Jr. truly was. James Duhan, Scotty's missing finger. "I'm giving her all she's got, Captain." That famous line was spoken by Montgomery Scotty Scott, the chief engineer on the Starship Enterprise in the original Star Trek series. The actor who played Scotty, James Duhan, had an amazing secret that most fans never knew. He was missing his right middle finger. Long before he became famous as Scotty, James Duhan was a real-life hero during World War II. He served as a lieutenant in the Canadian Artillery and was part of the D-Day invasion at Juno Beach. While leading night maneuvers, Duhan was hit by friendly fire. 6 bullets from his own side accidentally struck him. 4 bullets hit his leg, 1 hit his chest, but was stopped by a cigarette case in his pocket, and the last one completely destroyed his right middle finger. Years later, when he was cast as Scotty on Star Trek, Duhan and the production crew came up with clever ways to hide his missing finger. He would strategically keep his damaged hand off camera whenever possible. When his hand needed to be in the shot, he often partially concealed it behind equipment or control panels on the Enterprise. Sometimes Duhan would curl his hand around clipboards or tools to hide the gap where his middle finger should be. For scenes where his hand would be very visible, he occasionally wore a flesh-colored glove with a prosthetic finger. The camera operators helped too. They framed shots to avoid showing his hand clearly, and the editors were careful to cut around any clear views of the amputation. All these efforts meant that only in freeze-frame moments could eagle-eyed viewers spot evidence of Duhan's missing finger. James Duhan kept this wartime sacrifice a secret throughout most of his iconic television career. Most Star Trek fans had no idea that the beloved engineer they watched every week had been wounded in combat. It wasn't until many years later, when Star Trek conventions became popular and fans could meet the actors in person, that many discovered Scotty's hidden heroism and sacrifice. Isn't it amazing how these Hollywood stars overcame such difficult challenges? They lived in a time when movie studios expected actors and actresses to look perfect. If they had a disability or a scar or anything that made them look different, they might lose their jobs. But instead of giving up, these clever performers found ways to work around their physical differences. They used special makeup, clever camera angles, special lighting, and other tricks to hide their conditions. They worked extra hard to make sure audiences never knew about their challenges. The really cool thing is that many of these stars actually turned their differences into strengths. Peter Faulk made his head-turning gaze part of Columbo's character. Claude Reigns' voice became more important because of his eye injury. Sammy Davis Jr. became even more dynamic and energetic in his performances. These stories show us that what might seem like a big problem doesn't have to stop you from following your dreams. All these stars found creative solutions to their challenges and went on to have amazing careers that people still remember today. They also remind us that what we see on screen isn't always the whole truth. Behind the glamour and fame, these stars were dealing with pain, adaptation, and overcoming obstacles that the public never knew about. So next time you watch an old movie or TV show, remember that the stars you're watching might have been hiding secret challenges while they entertained millions. Their determination and creativity allowed them to shine despite their differences, and that's something we can all learn from. Thanks for watching, YouTube friends. If you enjoyed learning about these old Hollywood secrets, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the past. See you in the next video.